Hello and welcome to the Interpreting Wine, Drinks and Hospitality podcast. I'm of course your host and podcast founder, Lawrence Francis. Across 8 episodes welcoming you to the Austrian wine producing region of Wagram. While I've covered several Austrian producers on the podcast, this is the first series featuring a deep dive of a single region, with all the episodes recorded with producers in Wagram in September 2019. In their own words, they'll introduce you to the geology, the history, the local grape varieties, winemaking styles, and of course, wines of the region. All of the producers are at least organic and some are biodynamic. And interestingly, many of these wines are not yet available in major overseas markets. And where producers are seeking representation, I've included details in each episode. So without further ado, here's today's episode of this Wagram special. Today's episode of the Wagram special features Catherine Vass of Gut Oberstockstall. A truly diverse business and ecosystem built on biodynamic principles. Catherine tells us the origin story of Gut Oberstockstall before guiding us through a tasting of 8 of their wines. A really interesting selection that shows the diversity of grapes that they're growing. Before she talks business diversity, expands on Fritz Salomon's philosophy, and talks export markets. Enjoy!
So I'm Catherine. I've been working here for about a year, a bit longer. I mainly do export and sales, but I do a bit of everything because we're a small business. So I work in the vineyards, bottling line, like today. We've got a big bottling day today. And we're basically here at Gut Oberstockstall in the Wagram wine area. It's a very old place. Wine has been made here for a very long time. Actually, the first walls of Gut Oberstockstall were built in the mid-12th century. And then it used to belong to the church of Passau. They used to collect the grapes from the area, make the wine, and then distribute it. What we see here today, we've got a whole farm, not only a whole farm. We've got a restaurant, guest rooms, winery, including the vineyards, but also, and that's a very important point for us, because we are a Demeter certified winery. This means we've got a holistic approach of farming. We have 14 hectares of vineyards, but in total we have 100 hectares. This means we also have crop like corn, quinoa, cattle, an Austrian, it's called Waldviertler Blondvieh. We've got sheep and geese running around the property all day. Yeah, and this is very important for us because we try to close the whole circle of farm life. This means the crop we produce, we feed our animals. The manure of the animals we use for fertilization. Our preparations, we make them ourselves twice a year.
We're standing here in the tasting room. I think there'll be some nice ambient sounds coming from the bottling, which is great. And I'm just curious because I think you did such a fantastic job there of describing the region and almost like giving us a kind of a virtual tour of some of the specific vineyards. I'm just wondering, do you think there therefore is a kind of some kind of a similarity that you think that gives to the range of wines that you have here? That you can maybe people can potentially pick out as that could be a Wagram wine, regardless of grape variety almost.
Wagram, I can't promise, but I can promise for Fritz Salomon wines that you definitely know that it is Oberstockstall, that it is Fritz Salomon's vineyards, because the wines, every single wine tastes different, every vintage tastes different, but you always get this saltiness. They always got a nice body. Most of the wines do malolactic fermentation, This means that they are a bit creamier than others might be. Yeah, and the saltiness, I think that's mainly from the soil and from the climate.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as I say, we're stood here in the tasting room. You've very kindly chosen a selection of wines, and and as well, I think some grape varieties that I've not tried yet in the Wagram. So I'm just very excited to have you guide us through what these wines are saying, and just to kind of describe them in your own way to us.
So the first wine we're tasting is a vintage 2017 single vineyard Gruner Veltliner. We call it Brunnen. You visited the vineyard before. It's Brunnenberg.
The oldest vineyard.
The oldest vineyard, yes. Oldest Gruner Veltliner vineyards. Yeah. I picked the 17 vintage first for a good reason, because it's a bit lighter in body than the next one we're going to try. It's got a nice medium high acidity. It's got a nice appley taste, but more towards the yellow apples. It's got that saltiness I was talking about. It's mouth-filling, and Fritz sometimes calls it the Urgrüner Veltliner. I don't know how to say that in English. Yeah. The original Gruner Veltliner taste. Yeah. Okay. And the menu in the restaurant changes seasonally. So, but this one can be paired with a lot of food, also main dishes. It could go with starters because of its lighter body. I'd pair it with probably veal, chicken, turkey, something like that. Not too roasty. And this wine in particular, we used it a lot because there are weddings happening every weekend at Good Oberstockstall, and I think this was the wine most drunk at weddings this year.
Okay.
Right. So we're going back in time now. We're staying with the same wine. It's again Gruner Veltliner Brunnen, but this time vintage 2016. I just wanted to give you an idea how different a vintage can be. 17, we had a nice year, pretty average year, nice quantities. In 16, there was a bit of hail. This means we had a lot less quantity, but a lot of great quality grapes. And with this wine, of course, it's a year older. It had a year longer time to mature. It's rounder on the palate. It's a bit more mouth-filling to me. Some people might say it tastes sweeter, but I'd call it extract sweetness. And that might be because of the low quantities of berries on the vines. Yeah, because it was so concentrated. And again, yellow apples, pears, I would say. Right now I feel like it's got a bit more acidity than the other one. I usually don't get that. Right now, it's got a bit more of that lime acidity. Yeah, food. I would do this. I would pair this with boiled beef, Tafelspitz, spinach and potatoes. That's a typical Austrian dish. This one would work perfectly well with it. Also, I just wanted to focus again on the vintages because on our list, as you can see, we've got a lot of different vintages. But this is for a good reason, because our wines just need time to finish. Some need a bit longer, some are finished earlier. We've only got one wine of vintage 18 bottled so far. We're not going to bottle any 18 tomorrow, because tomorrow we've got another bottling day. Just because, to give the wine time to mature and to be finished to drink once it's bottled, but also that it has enough stability for storage. So we're going back to vintage 2018. That's our youngest wine at the moment. Gruner Veltliner again. What we're tasting now is a field blend. We call it Wahrein Gruner Veltliner. Wahrein used to be the name of Wagram back in the day. Can't tell you a year. But that's the old name for Wagram. Yeah. This one's a vintage 18, and it again shows how different every year is. This one is a lot, it's got more body than the other ones. The other ones were more extract sweetness and, maturity. And this one is, it's got that spiciness. It's got a medium acidity. It's very mild. It's lovely to drink. Again, a great wine to pair with food. A bit more body, as I said. Again, with the apple pear, I'd say, taste. Yeah. And it will be lovely once, will be lovely for a very long time, I think. Yeah. So the next wine is the last Gruner Veltliner we're going to taste. It's again a vintage 2016. We're going back in time again. It's a single vineyard wine. The vineyard is called Maulbeerpark or Maulbeerpark. It's actually a part of the vineyard Brunnen, the one you visited. But it's always nice to do a single wine of this part of the vineyard because the microclimate in the vineyard is so different from the rest. The vineyard is surrounded by acacia and mulberry trees. This means it's not that open to wind. It's warmer, and you sure can taste it. This one had a bit of bottle aging for about a year. I think that was a good idea to do that. It's got, again, a mild acidity with saltiness. But on the palate, I can taste a lot of fruit, a lot of tropical fruit, also apples as well, but I taste a lot of pineapple. And that gives it a bit of more acidity, I think. There's a lot of extract sweetness again. It's again mouth-filling, round, medium-bodied. Yeah, again, a great wine to pair with food. I'd experiment a bit more with that wine. I'd go from boiled beef to maybe goose in autumn. I would try that. I'd give it a go, yeah.
I just want to say a few words now, really, but just because we're leaving the Gruner Veltliners behind, and I think it's really, I'll just sort of repeat something that I've said earlier in the series, really. It's just what has really surprised me, I think, in these last, 4 visits, really, is just the versatility of the Gruner Veltliner to display those differences that you're talking about. It's interesting that the last wine that we're trying here, the Maulbeerpark, it's from the same area, it's from the same sort of region, it's got that microclimate, it's from the same year as the Brunnen 2016, but it's completely different. I mean, I'm sort of asking you off mic there about if this was fermented in acacia, because it's totally taking me to, it's reminiscent really of some of the other wines that I've had that have been fermented in acacia. So it's obviously drawing that influence from its location, and presumably because it is an older vineyard, it's had the time to kind of integrate in whatever way that it wants to with the acacia forests that are kind of nearby. And I would certainly echo what you said earlier about that lovely salinity that's coming through. These are definitely wines to have with food, to have at the dinner table, but they also really versatile. And I think you've made some great suggestions there about how you might play around and experiment. And certainly with the last wine, I can imagine those different notes being picked up and complementing a huge range of different foods from even around the world, but of course from right here in Austria.
So before we move to the next grape variety, I would like to talk a bit about winemaking and Fritz Salomon himself, his philosophy and his approach to winemaking. A lot of work happens during the year in the vineyards. It's a lot of work. You stand there, it's cold, you work with your hands, a long day, and it's definitely worth it once it's harvest time, because then there's less work for us, which means in Austria, if you're Demeter, or in general, if you're Demeter certified, estate, you're only allowed to do spontaneous fermentation, which means you can only use the wild yeast on the berries. This means, we press our wines whole bunch. We let it settle overnight. We pump it into a new tank, and then we wait and see what happens. We sometimes, wreck it, sometimes not. Depends on how stable the wine is. Sometimes it needs a bit longer time on the full lees, sometimes a bit longer on the fine lees. But that's basically what we're doing. It's low intervention. And Fritz believes, like last year he said, I think I've done everything right in the vineyards this year, so we'll be fine. Yeah. We don't do a lot of, we don't have a real laboratory. We only measure acidity and sugar. I don't know anything else about, that's the only thing we do. We taste. We don't really measure. Some people do 100 berry testing. Fritz goes outside into the vineyards, tastes the grapes, and if they've got a great taste, it's time for harvest. Most of our wines are fermented in stainless steel and also matured in stainless steel. So is the next one we're going to try. This is Riesling, single vineyard, 2016. So it's a single vineyard because that's the only Riesling vineyard we have, Tobel. It's open to wind, that vineyard, and sometimes it's a bit cooler during the night. So sometimes we get a few problems with frost, but it also always gives it a nice acidity. Riesling, it sometimes needs a bit longer to open up in the nose, its aromas. But on the palate, to me it's a typical Riesling. It's got that grapefruity acidity. It's got peach and apricot, that stone fruit taste. And it's a vintage 16 and it's still very youthful. It doesn't have any signs of aging or any sorts of that. It's also a current vintage. 17 is going to be bottled tomorrow. Again, it's got that saltiness. To me, that's just a red line all through the whole portfolio. Again, even Riesling does malolactic fermentation because we don't control anything. It happens because you got it in your cellar and it just happens. That makes it mouth-filling. Yeah, I think it's lovely. This I would do, pair more with fish foods, maybe starters, nothing too sour or savoury, I'd say.
I think this is now, for me, it's so great to have you here because you can talk to the side in the vineyard and what's happening in terms of the development of the grapes and their sugar and that finesse, I would say. And this is drinking so beautifully. It's in such a nice place, I would say. And I'm definitely with you. I think that is the Riesling that I kind of really go for. Personally, I do go for the drier styles. But, I love acidity, but not, out of balance acidity, not acidity kind of for the sake of it that you're looking to, have to maybe pair with something or to be compensated by the food. I just think this in and of itself feels like a complete wine, but absolutely, as you say, this is just, that salinity is there again, and it's, again, crying out for some food, but this is also very drinkable, I got to say.
We're going to vintage 17 now, a single vineyard Chardonnay, and I picked it particularly because you visited the vineyard Waasweg. The first Chardonnay grapes or vines were planted by Fritz's grandfathers. They're called Josef Jamek and Fritz Salomon. That was very early on. They planted Burgundy grape varieties in particular because I think the Wagram area is perfect for Burgundy grape varieties because of the loose soils, because of the climate and everything. Yeah, again, the Chardonnay was fermented spontaneously in stainless steel. It was on the fine lees for 2 years because we only bottled it in May, only to give it stability, structure, and I think that's what you get. Tasting the wine on the palate, you get a mouthful of wine, you get a mouthful of fruit, also apple, pear, also a bit tropical fruit, I'd say. I get a mild acidity, but then again you've got the saltiness that supports the mild acidity. It gives it a nice frame to the wine on the palate. Yeah, this wine was bottled unfiltered. It's not cloudy, but we don't stir it up usually. We just let it settle and then, yeah. So basically we stopped filtering because it takes a lot of taste, a lot of extract, sweetness, a lot of structure, body, yeah. And that's why we don't do it. And I think it's good. Yeah, I like it that way.
I'll just sort of, I guess, say something here. Really, you've done a fine job there, and it's really interesting to know that lees time and that, I guess, patience that's been taken with this to make sure that it's coming into the bottle and into the glass in a good place. And I think it's interesting. I mean, so many people, they refer to the Chardonnay as being, such a neutral grape and that it needs the wood and, but I think it's almost here in the glass we're seeing that philosophy played out there, that if you, have the time, have the patience with it, then you can get something that does all of the things that you've just said there, but is also just very, it's a joy to drink. It's just such a great example of how good Chardonnay can be, and it's also just really super interesting. It's, as you say, still got that salinity coming through, and also it's the first Chardonnay that I've had on this trip and on this visit. So who knows? Maybe a grape to be looked at in other parts of the region.
So that's the last white wine we're going to taste, and another Burgundy grape variety, Weisser Burgunder or Pinot Blanc. I picked the vintage 2015 for a good reason. This is a bit of a different style than we tasted before, because we used old barrique, old oak barrels with this wine, only because we didn't have enough quantity to use big stainless steel tanks because of frost. And then that's what you sometimes have to do. You sometimes have to improvise. You can't always do the same because every year is different. So we didn't have enough Pinot Blanc grapes for a big vat. That's why Fritz used a small used barrel. And yeah, you get that on the palate, definitely. In the nose, you get the oak, but not too much. I think it's very well integrated. It gives it a nice frame. It gives it a nice mouthfeel. It's soft, velvety, I'd say. It's still got that nice acidity and saltiness. But the aftertaste, you get the oak. You get that bit of oak, that bit of dark chocolatey finish, I'd call it. The last wine we're going to taste, Fritz just brought it in because it's straight off the bottling line. We just bottled it. It's a vintage 2016 Blauer Zweigelt red wine. Again, fermented in stainless steel on the lees, for a few years. It's not on sale yet, but it will be soon. Even though it's a vintage 2016, to me this is youthful. It's got nice in aromas of nice dark cherries, but also a bit of cherry blossom. On the palate you get that sour cherry, you do get that malolactic fermentation. It sometimes tasted a bit, not in this case not buttery, but more yogurt kind of thing. a nice acidity. That's why sour cherry. And yeah, soft tannins, I would say. The tannins are not too strong. Also, because Wagram is mainly a wine region for Gruner Veltliner, Roter Veltliner, white wines, our red wines are always lighter in body. So what I sometimes do is to chill our Zweigelt a bit in summer. Yeah, it's nice to have a bit of a lighter red wine as well.
I wholeheartedly go along with what you said here. I think, just as I was just mentioning kind of off mic, it's only the second red that I've tried, and I think it just kind of goes to show. It's showing all of the things that you mentioned there. It's this is a region that can obviously produce great red wines as well. It wants to be, and is putting forward Gruner Veltliner and Roter Veltliner, but I think there is a lot to be discovered. There's a lot of diversity. You just have to, I guess, give the wines a chance and seek them out where they're available. So, I feel very happy to have tried something. It's a week of firsts here. Trying a bottle straight off the bottling line, which is fantastic. Brilliant tasting. Really, really enjoyed it. Thank you so much. Just as we're, as I say, standing in the tasting room, and there are sort of there's a piece from a magazine, I think, that's been sort of enlarged and is showing some of the very nice looking guest rooms, and I'm also seeing some of the other products that are kind of on sale here around me. I'm thinking about the diversity. So I guess maybe you've spoken of the diversity to the terroir and to the wines, and maybe speak a little bit to the diversity on the business side of things. I think that would be really interesting to hear.
Yeah. On the business side of things, we're quite diverse, I'd say. We don't only have wine and a restaurant and a bit of agriculture and cattle. We also do juices, homemade jam. Fritz produced a vermouth from vermouth growing in the vineyards. We call it vermouth pur because there's nothing in there, just wine and Weinbrand, we'd say in German. And that Wermutkraut, so it tastes, pure. That's why it's called Wermut pur. Because there's a lot of weddings, and good Oberstockstall is not right next to Vienna, but very close. But if you want to have a nice evening at our restaurant, a 6-course meal including wine pairing, then it's useful that we've got a few guest rooms. We've got 7 guest rooms. They were renovated. 2 were finished last year. The others were renovated about 6 years ago. And the nice thing is the architect is Fritz's father's best friend. So he's still here. He gave his touch to the rooms, but what he tried to do, and what he did actually is to keep it very simple and to let the feel be the way it used to be back in the day, because the rooms are Renaissance style, and also nice homemade, nice breakfast, organic breakfast, of course, with a lot of homemade foods and produce. Walnuts, apricots, a lot.
Then, let's maybe, close it out in terms of out there in the market a little bit. Talking, I think that, a lot of my listeners are in the UK, in the US, or kind of all over the world, really. There's maybe a couple of things to talk to. Just, I guess, maybe some of your success when spreading the word. I know you've been out on the road this year already into London and talking about Fritz's wines and pouring them over there, and then also you mentioned earlier about the Renaissance de les Appellations and your membership there. So I think that would be a great place to leave it.
We export about 30% of our wines. Main markets are Japan and Netherlands, Germany, of course. But we're trying to expand, and we were lucky enough to become a member of the group Renaissance des Appellations. So I did my first tasting with them in Bordeaux earlier this year at the Vinexpo. It was great. It was nice to be. It was only for one day, but it was good because everybody knew this is biodynamic wine, very natural, and I enjoyed that day very much. I also visited the London Wine Fair earlier this year. It was great to be there in the UK, and we're definitely still looking for somebody to import our wines and distribute our wines in the UK. Also, I think Scandinavia would be a great place for us, Norway probably, and that's the main markets I'm going to look into in after harvest, I think. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Catherine. An absolute pleasure to taste with you and to meet you on the day. Great also to be there on a day when you're bottling and capture this energy in the podcast. You can, of course, find below website, Instagram and email address for good Oberstockstall. And if you haven't already subscribed, do head to interpretingwine.com/listen to do so. And if you have subscribed, then why not leave a rating on the platform where you're listening? Next time in the Wagram special, in episode 339, we head to Weingut Zollner. See you then.